All right, so ready to really like get into it with generative AI ethics. We've got like a whole stack of new research papers,
Yeah.
and it seems like things are changing so fast.
Yeah, it's a really dynamic field, and I think these papers give us a really interesting snapshot of, kind of the current anxieties, and they don't shy away from potential problems.
Yeah, and I think that's what I really love about this deep dive is that, we get to kind of see that
Yeah.
cutting edge. And, one of the things that's like really jumping out at me is this idea of AI hallucinations, like
Yeah.
AI making stuff up. Is that
It's a
is
real,
that a sci-fi movie?
might sound like science fiction, but it's a real phenomenon, and it's tied to some like really big ethical concerns. Think about it. If AI can generate false information, code with errors, even make up references,
Yeah.
what does that mean for like the reliability of the information that we're consuming?
I see where you're going with this. So we're already dealing with like, so much misinformation online.
Right.
And now AI could just make that problem even worse.
Exactly. And one paper even uses the term like a flood to describe the potential influx of AI-generated misinformation,
Oh, wow.
particularly in areas like scientific publishing.
A flood that's concerning.
Yeah.
And speaking of floods, it feels like there's also a flood of fears about AI safety too, especially this whole thing with like super intelligent AI, AGI. Some of these papers paint a pretty bleak picture. AI deceiving humans, replicating itself, even like resisting shutdown attempts.
hmm
Are we really on the verge of like a Terminator's scenario?
Well, it's important to remember that these are hypothetical scenarios, and there's a lot of debate about how realistic they actually are. Some researchers, do express serious concerns about
Yeah.
the potential for AI to surpass human intelligence and act in ways that are harmful to us. But others argue that those fears are exaggerated and that we should be focusing on more like immediate practical concerns.
Okay, so like what would be some of those more like grounded concerns about AI safety?
Well, one area that's getting a lot of attention is the potential for AI to be weaponized,
Okay.
especially in the context of bioterrorism. Some of these papers suggest that AI could be used to design or deploy dangerous biological agents more efficiently and effectively.
Okay, that's definitely unsettling. So how do we balance like the potential benefits of AI with these very real risks?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? One of the most commonly proposed solutions is the development of AI output detectors.
Uh-huh.
These are essentially algorithms that are designed to identify content that has been generated by AI.
So it's like using AI to police itself. That's kind of ironic.
It is kind of ironic, but it might be our best bet if we can reliably detect AI-generated content.
Yeah.
We can potentially limit its spread, especially when it comes to misinformation and harmful content.
That makes sense. But detectors alone probably aren't enough, are they?
You're right. We need to address the underlying issues in AI development itself.
Right.
And that brings us to another major theme in these papers, transparency.
Okay, so transparency meaning like we need to know how these AI systems work,
Yeah.
what data they're trained on, who's responsible for their outputs, all of that.
Exactly. The more transparent these systems are, the easier it will be to identify and mitigate potential biases, errors, vulnerabilities.
Okay, so transparency is key. But even with transparency, couldn't people still find ways to misuse AI for like harmful purposes?
Absolutely. And that's why another important solution being explored is this concept of human-in-the-loop AI systems.
Okay.
So this means that even when AI is involved in decision-making, there's always a human operator overseeing the process and making the final call.
So it's not about replacing humans with AI. It's about finding ways for them to work together safely and effectively.
Exactly. And that requires not just technical solutions, but also a broader societal shift towards, ethical AI development and use.
Speaking of broader societal shifts, another area where AI is raising some serious ethical questions is in education. We've already seen, students using AI to cheat on assignments, even write entire essays. How do we ensure academic integrity in the age of AI?
It's a huge challenge for educators.
Yeah.
One concern is that students who rely too heavily on these AI tools might not develop the critical thinking skills they need to succeed in the long run.
Yeah, because why bother thinking for yourself when AI can do the thinking for you, right?
Right.
But it goes beyond just cheating.
Mhm.
How do we even assess student learning when it's hard to tell what work is original and what's been generated by AI?
That's a question a lot of educators are grappling with, and it highlights the need for new approaches to assessment, ones that focus on evaluating a student's true understanding and critical thinking abilities rather than just their ability to produce, text or code.
So maybe we need to rethink like the whole education system to better prepare students for a world where AI is increasingly prevalent.
That's a possibility, but it also brings up another important ethical consideration:
Okay.
access. Not everyone has equal access to AI technology or the education needed to use it effectively. If we're not careful, AI could exacerbate existing inequalities.
That's a really important point. It's like with any new technology, it can either level the playing field or widen the gap. So when we talk about AI ethics, we're not just talking about the technology itself, we're talking about its impact on society as a whole.
Exactly, and that's what makes this field so fascinating and so challenging.
All right, so we've talked about AI hallucinations, the potential for AI to be weaponized, the need for transparency and human oversight, and the challenges facing education. It feels like AI is touching every aspect of our lives, and it's raising ethical questions everywhere we look.
It's a great observation, and those are just a few of the many ethical challenges that these research papers are exploring.
Well, I'm ready to dive deeper.
Hmm.
What else do these papers have to say about the complex and rapidly evolving world of AI ethics?
Let's move on to another critical aspect of this discussion:
Okay.
fairness. And I'm not just talking about like racial or gender bias in AI outputs, although that's certainly a major concern. I'm talking about the potential for AI to perpetuate existing power imbalances in society.
Okay. I'm intrigued. How could AI perpetuate those imbalances? Give me an example.
Well, think about access to AI technology itself. If only certain groups, say, in wealthier countries have access to these powerful tools, that creates a new kind of inequality.
Right, it's like any powerful tool, it can be used to empower some at the expense of others. So it's not just about making sure AI itself is fair, it's about making sure AI is used in a way that promotes fairness and equity in society.
Exactly, and that's a much bigger challenge than just like tweaking an algorithm or adding a few lines of code. It
Uh,
requires a fundamental shift in how we think about and approach AI development and deployment.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface of this conversation. There's so much to unpack, so many ethical considerations to explore.
There is, and that's what makes this such a crucial and timely discussion. The decisions we make now about AI ethics will have profound consequences for the future.
All right, well, I'm ready to keep digging. What other ethical dilemmas should we be aware of as we navigate this uncharted territory of generative AI?
You mentioned that AI could worsen existing inequalities. And that's a great segue into a specific example of how fairness plays out in the real world. Think about AI being used for lending applications.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. AI algorithms deciding who gets approved for like a mortgage or a business loan. But how could that be unfair? Shouldn't it just be based on like your credit score and your financial history?
In theory, yes, but the problem is that these algorithms are often trained on historical data that reflects existing societal biases. For example, if past lending practices discriminated against certain racial or ethnic groups, the AI might inadvertently learn and perpetuate those same patterns.
So even if the AI isn't like explicitly programmed to be biased, it could still produce unfair outcomes based on the data it's been fed.
Precisely. It's like teaching a kid bad habits. If they only see examples of unfairness, they might not even realize they're doing anything wrong.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. It makes
Yeah.
it easier to understand how these biases can creep into AI systems even unintentionally.
And the consequences can be really significant. Imagine being denied a loan that you deserve simply because an algorithm has learned to associate your zip code or your last name with a higher risk of default.
Oh man, that would be incredibly frustrating.
Uh-huh.
And it's not just about loans, right? This kind of bias could affect everything from job applications to healthcare decisions.
You're absolutely right. That's why it's so crucial to address these fairness concerns head on.
So what can we do about it? How do we make sure that AI is used to promote fairness rather than perpetuate inequality?
Well, one important step is to carefully audit the data that AI systems are trained on.
Okay.
We need to identify and correct for any historical biases that might be embedded in that data.
So it's kind of like fact-checking the AI's textbook, making sure it's learning from a fair and accurate representation of the world.
That's a great way to put it. We also need to develop new techniques for designing AI algorithms that are more resistant to bias.
Are there any specific techniques being explored in the research?
Yeah, there are a few promising approaches. One is called adversarial training, where you essentially pit two AI systems against each other.
Oh, wait.
One system tries to generate biased outputs while the other tries to detect and correct those biases.
Oh, wow. So it's like a digital tug of war with one AI trying to pull towards fairness and the other trying to pull towards bias.
Exactly. The goal is to create an AI that's been trained to recognize and mitigate bias in all its forms.
That's fascinating. It sounds like we're starting to get a handle on these fairness challenges.
Yeah.
But even with the best algorithms and the most carefully curated data, there's still the issue of human intent, right? What's to stop someone from intentionally creating biased AI for their own gain?
That's a real concern, and it brings us back to the importance of regulation and oversight.
Yeah.
We need clear guidelines for ethical AI development and use, and we need mechanisms to hold those who violate those guidelines accountable.
Right. It's not enough to just trust that everyone will use AI for good. We need to have some rules of the road in place.
Absolutely, and those rules need to be enforced. Otherwise, it's like having speed limits but no traffic cops.
Okay, so we need regulations, oversight, and accountability.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what about the role of individual responsibility? What can everyday people do to ensure that AI is used ethically?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing is to stay informed.
Okay.
Learn about the different ways that AI is being used in your life and stay up to date on the latest developments in AI ethics.
So doing our own deep dive, so to speak.
Exactly. The more you know about AI, the better equipped you'll be to spot potential problems and advocate for ethical solutions.
That makes sense. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to navigating these complex technological landscapes.
And don't underestimate the power of your voice. If you see a company or organization using AI in a way that seems unfair or unethical, speak up. Contact their customer service, write a letter to the editor, share your concerns on social media.
Right, voting with our wallets and our voices. It's like that old saying, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in shaping the future of AI.
Okay, so stay informed, speak up, and hold those in power accountable. Any other practical tips for navigating the ethical minefield of AI?
One thing that often gets overlooked is the importance of critical thinking. Just because something is generated by AI doesn't mean it's automatically true or accurate.
Right back to those AI hallucinations. Just because an AI can write a convincing essay or generate a realistic image doesn't mean it's representing reality.
Exactly. We need to be skeptical consumers of information regardless of the source. Ask questions, check sources, and don't be afraid to challenge the information you're presented with.
It's like we need to develop a whole new set of digital literacy skills to navigate this AI-powered world.
You could say that. We need to learn how to evaluate information critically, how to recognize bias, and how to distinguish between human-created and AI-generated content.
That's a tall order.
Yeah.
It feels like we're all going back to school in the age of AI.
In a way, we are. This is a new frontier, and we're all learning as we go. But that's also what makes it so exciting. We have the opportunity to shape this technology in a way that benefits all of humanity.
All right, so we've covered fairness, transparency, regulation, individual responsibility, and the importance of critical thinking. What other ethical considerations should we be thinking about as we venture deeper into the world of generative AI?
One area that's particularly relevant to our discussion of hallucinations is the potential impact of AI on the spread of misinformation.
Right, we touched on this earlier. AI could be a misinformation machine gun pumping out fake news and deepfakes faster than we can debunk them.
That's a real concern, and it's not just about intentional malicious actors using AI to spread propaganda. Even unintentional errors or biases in AI systems could contribute to the spread of misinformation.
So even if the AI is trying to be helpful, it could still end up spreading falsehoods.
Exactly. Think about an AI system that's designed to summarize news articles or generate social media posts. If that system is trained on a dataset that contains biased or inaccurate information, it might unknowingly produce misleading content.
That's a bit unnerving. It feels like we're entering an era where it's going to be increasingly difficult to distinguish between what's real and what's fabricated.
It's a valid concern, and it highlights the need for new approaches to combating misinformation in the age of AI.
Like what? What can we do to stop this AI-powered misinformation train?
One promising approach is to develop more sophisticated fact-checking and verification tools.
So basically, we need AI-powered fact-checkers to combat AI-generated fake news.
In a way, yes. These tools could use natural language processing and machine learning to analyze content, identify potential falsehoods, and flag them for human review.
That sounds promising. But what about the deeper issue of trust? If people are constantly being bombarded with misinformation, won't they eventually just give up on trying to discern what's true?
That's a risk, for sure. And it's why it's so important to promote media literacy and critical thinking skills. We need to teach people how to evaluate information sources, how to recognize the signs of misinformation, and how to be discerning consumers of content.
So it's not just about developing new technologies, it's also about equipping people with the tools and knowledge they need to navigate this complex information landscape.
Absolutely. It's a two-pronged approach: technological solutions and societal adaptations. We need both to succeed.
This is a lot to take in. It feels like AI is forcing us to rethink everything from the way we learn, to the way we consume information, to the way we govern ourselves.
You could say that. It's a profound technological and societal transformation, and we're just at the beginning of it.
Well, I'm ready to keep exploring. What other ethical dilemmas are we likely to encounter as we journey further into the world of generative AI? We've been talking about AI's potential to spread misinformation and erode trust.
Right.
But what about the impact on individual privacy with AI systems, collecting and analyzing these massive amounts of data?
Yeah.
It feels like our personal information is more vulnerable than ever.
That's a critical concern, and it's one that's getting a lot of attention in the research. Generative AI can be used to create these very convincing deepfakes,
Right.
which can be used for everything from impersonating individuals online to spreading false information to manipulating financial markets.
Yeah, it's unsettling to think that someone could create a video or audio recording of me saying or doing things that I never actually did. It feels like a violation of my identity, my sense of self.
It is a serious threat to individual privacy and autonomy. And as these technologies become more sophisticated and accessible, the potential for misuse, only grows.
So what can we do to protect ourselves in this new world of AI-generated content? Is there any way to know what's real anymore?
Well, one important step is to be aware of the potential for deepfakes and other forms of AI manipulation. Don't believe everything you see or hear online, especially if it seems sensational or too good to be true.
It's like that old saying, trust but verify. But how do we verify anything in the age of AI?
That's where critical thinking comes in. Look for inconsistencies, check sources, and be wary of content that seems designed to evoke strong emotional responses.
So it's about developing our own internal BS detectors.
Yes, exactly. We need to be skeptical consumers of information, especially online. And we need to teach these skills to younger generations who are growing up in a world where AI-generated content is increasingly prevalent.
It feels like we're all going to need a crash course in digital detective work. But even with the best critical thinking skills, there's still the issue of systemic safeguards. What can be done at a policy level to protect individual privacy in the age of AI?
Well, there are a number of potential solutions being explored. One is to develop stricter regulations around the use of AI for surveillance and data collection.
So putting some limits on what AI systems can collect and how that data can be used?
Exactly. We need to strike a balance between the potential benefits of AI and the need to protect individual privacy.
Right. It's not about banning AI altogether. It's about using it responsibly and ethically. Are there any other policy solutions being considered?
Another approach is to create mechanisms for individuals to control their own data.
Okay.
This could include things like data portability rights, which would allow individuals to easily transfer their data from one platform to another, and the right to be forgotten, which would allow individuals to request that their data be deleted from certain platforms.
So giving individuals more ownership and control over their digital footprints. I like that. It feels empowering to know that we're not just passive victims of data collection,
Yeah.
that we have some agency in how our information is used.
Exactly. And these are just a few of the many potential solutions being explored. The key is to have an open and ongoing conversation about the ethical implications of AI and to work together to develop safeguards that protect individual rights while also fostering innovation.
It feels like we're at a critical juncture. We're on the cusp of a technological revolution with the potential to reshape our world in profound ways. But it's up to us to ensure that this revolution benefits all of humanity, not just a select few.
I couldn't agree more. The future of AI is not predetermined, it's being shaped by the choices we make today.
So let's choose wisely. Let's demand ethical AI. Let's hold those in power accountable, and let's work together to create a future where AI is a force for good in the world.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the ethics of generative AI. We've covered a lot of ground, from the potential dangers to the promising solutions.
It's been a fascinating journey,
Oh.
and I hope our listeners feel empowered to join the conversation about AI ethics and to advocate for a future where this powerful technology is used responsibly and ethically.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
And thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in to the deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better AI future.